Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about the nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, share our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 91, The Bank Robbery. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. It's Valentine's Day. Instead of getting Fran a romantic card, Maxwell gives her a card that says, "What rhymes with Cupid?" and opens up to a mirror that then says, "Happy Valentine's Day, stupid." The card does not go over well, and things escalate. Maxwell says that he wishes he never told Fran that he loved her in the first place, and she claims that her entire nervous system shut down. Then Sylvia and Yetta arrive with news. Yetta's met a man and wants to get married. Convinced that this potential suitor is up to no good, Sylvia wants to go to the bank to make sure that both signatures are required on withdrawals from the shared account. While Fran and Sylvia are waiting to speak to a bank teller, a man comes in and quietly announces this is a holdup. In what is the first of his multiple missteps, he speaks too quietly to be taken seriously. As Fran correctly guesses, his mother drove him to rob the bank to get her out of his life. Fran donates her bracelet to his cause before she and the robber have what can only be described as an unusual first date. Upon learning that Fran and Sylvia are being held hostage, Maxwell and Niles rush down to the bank and Maxwell regrets his callousness. The robber begins to use Fran and Sylvia as human shields, and Maxwell announces that he's not sorry that he told Fran he loved her, and she rushes into his arms as the robber makes off with Sylvia, only to be captured by her desire for Mongolian barbecue. In the end, Fran gets the last laugh. She gives Maxwell a Valentine's Day card with puppy dogs on it that says, "For Valentine's Day, I give you my heart. Worm." Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
Nope.
All right. Would you like to take us to scene 1 in the office?
Yes. So we open up in the office. Niles and Miles are there. And again, Niles is saying, "Happy Valentine's Day, sir. Have you decided what to get Miss Fine?" Yes. Nothing.
Right.
And Niles is like, "Oh, sir, you can't get the same thing you got me," which was obviously nothing.
Correct.
But then we learn that actually Maxwell got Fran something he considers, a funny card. And he's explaining to Niles, it says on the front, what rhymes with Cupid? And inside you see a mirror and it says, "Happy Valentine's Day, stupid." And Niles is kind of like, Maxwell's laughing at this, and Niles does not seem to think it's as funny as Maxwell's making it.
Did you think it was funny?
No.
Of course not. Thank you.
No. And Fran walks in then, and clearly she is unhappy, and she has the card, and she like kind of gives it to him saying it's stupid, and Niles laughs. "Now that's funny, sir." But anyway, I think at this point Niles exits. Yep. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Fran, kind of lays into Maxwell, like, "How could you? This is the most romantic holiday. And, and you gave me this card." And he's like, "Well, I didn't want you to misinterpret it. I say, I love you. You misinterpret it." And she's like, "Moi?" And he's like, "Yeah, we wake up in bed together. You misinterpret it. We end up naked in the jacuzzi. You misinterpret it. I ask you to marry me." And then he seems to realize what he's saying. He's like saying to himself, "Do shut up, you babbling British moron."
Right.
And, and Fran's like, "Well, don't misinterpret it if one day you wake up with a high heel in your butt."
Mm-hmm.
So this is when Maxwell tells her, "I wish I never said I love you in the first place." And Fran like gasps, and she's just like, "My whole nervous system just shut down. I can't see." And then she exits, and Niles, in the meantime, has come back in, and Maxwell's kind of resigned to, like, fire away, tell me how stupid that was or whatever. And Niles is like, "Oh, no, sir, that's not my place." but a picture paints 1,000 words, and he like gives Maxwell the open card with the mirror.
Yup.
And that is the opening scene. Do you have anything to add to it?
The only thing I want to add is the visual of Fran. So after Maxwell says he wishes he never said, I loved you in the first place, she says, oh no, my whole nervous system just shut down. And she's like walking out. She has her arms out. She's like feeling out. Niles has like come in and he's like standing in the doorway, and she just like feels around him to like get out the door because she's saying she's just suddenly gone blind.
Yeah, she can't see. Yeah.
Right. It's an image.
Yes.
So, all right, I'll take us to scene 2. The doorbell rings and Fran shouts that she'll get it. She opens the door and there's her mother and grandmother. And Sylvia's like, oh, Fran, I'm so glad you're home. Yetta has lost her mind. To which Fran's like, and like, so what? So
it's new.
Exactly. This isn't news. Like, of course she's lost her mind. So Sylvia explains that she met a man and wants to get married. So Fran turns to Yetta. Why? Are you pregnant? And Yetta's like, I don't think so, but I'm really late.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, well, that makes her, Martha Ray, and Ava Braun all married before me. Well, Sylvia tries to explain how she's thinking about this. Like, this guy's up to no good. He looks at her and he sees dollar signs. And Fran's like, what? What, Ma? He's making a deal with the Colombians to move her stash of digitalis. She's got no money. And Sylvia's like, but she gets $200 a month from Social Security. What do you think he's after her? Flat tuchus? And Yetta's like, she's just jealous because so many men are attracted to me. Even my doctor says I got charisma. And Fran's like, that's arrhythmia, Yetta. So Sylvia explains that we're all going to go to the bank and make sure that the joint account that she shares with Yetta says both signatures required. And Fran's like, wait a minute, hold on, wait a minute. Maybe this guy's really attracted to her. And the camera turns to Yetta, who's like, yeah. And she's like putting her lipstick on, too much. And
yeah.
It's clear that Fran realizes that her hypothesis has just been disproven. So Fran's like, all right, come on, Val will drive us. And Sylvia continues to her mother saying, what were you thinking? This man is a baby. He's 60 years old. Fran's like, 60? Yetta, he's not even back in diapers yet. You should be ashamed of yourself. 2 of him together would be closer to your age. And Yetta's like, not interested. With 2 men, there's always jealousy, performance anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Fran's just like shocked and looking at her. And Yetta's like, what? So now you know a little something about Nana.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very strange scene. Do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to scene 3?
Yes. So we are now in Val's car. And Val's commenting, oh, great, a space right in front of the bank. And Fran points out that's a handicap spot. And then I think she makes a comment about how she's emotionally crippled.
That's Sylvia.
Val. Oh, so Sylvia. Yeah. But Fran's like telling Val, don't park illegally. That's mean. Go over there to the meter and put this on it. And she holds up like a brown bag that says out of order so that they could put that over it. And Val's just like, no, I'll just wait in the car. And Sylvia's like, oh, don't you want to go in and deposit? And Val's like, no, this isn't my bank. Oh, where do you keep your money? In a pig.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see Fran and Sylvia get out of the car and go into First Bank of Manhattan. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us into the bank?
So we're now, as you said, in the First Bank of Manhattan. And Fran and Sylvia are standing online, waiting for a teller to be available to help them out. And Sylvia's explaining this recipe. You coat your chicken in peanut butter and then you roll it in stale, crumbled ginger snaps. And 1, 2, 3, you've got Hawaiian chicken. And Fran looks kind of disgusted and is like, and Daddy likes this? And Sylvia's like, no, he can't stand the sight of it. And 1, 2, 3, I'm eating lobster at the seafood broiler. And Fran's like, oh, good, Ma. Meanwhile, this guy, this nervous looking guy comes up and taps Sylvia and says quietly, this is a holdup. What? And Fran's like, what's the holdup? Some Yenta's picking out designer checks. And needless to say, the robber has had enough at that point. He has a gun and shoots at the ceiling. That gets everyone's attention. Everyone drops to the floor. And he says, all right, everyone on the floor. And he has these little note cards. He's flipping through them. No quick moves and no one gets in small unmarked bills. And he realizes, wait, that isn't right. And Fran's like, oh my God, Ma, I can't believe we're in the middle of a bank robbery. Oh, poor Mr. Sheffield. If I die, he's going to feel so guilty about what he said. You know, this could work. And the robber's like, will you please shut up? And he like just gesticulates towards them. And Sylvia gets up and points to his hand. He's not wearing a ring. And Fran's like, Ma, he's a thief. And Sylvia explains, he's going to be worth millions in a matter of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting thought process, Sylvia.
Yep.
Anything you want to add, Bernadette?
No, I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us back to the office?
Yes, so we're back in the office. Maxwell's at his desk, but then Cece and Niles are also in there. And Cece's commenting up, oh, they're, making a remake of Lost in Space. I loved that as a child. Oh, I'm dating myself, by saying that she liked that as a child. And Niles, of course, classically cuts in, oh, that's just, you're dating yourself? That's just pathetic. Even you could do better than you. And again, Cece kind of responds back, oh, says the man who, parties with Pam, as in the cooking spray.
Is it a can?
And then,
yeah.
And then Niles starts making a comment about, oh, the next time you give away your clothes, you should just stay in them. And they start kind of talking over each other. And Maxwell finally has enough. And he's like, I don't want you in the same room again, we separate. And they're both like, what? And he's like, I can't stand you two together, and they're like, why? So they're totally oblivious to how annoying they could be to an outsider. This is just a run-of-the-mill exchange between them, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, at this point, Yetta and Gracie come in, and Yetta's telling them, oh, something terrible has happened. We saw it on the news. And, they're like, okay, what is it? And she's like, oh, I just lost it. And she kind of turns to Gracie, and Gracie's like, oh, don't worry. You told me in case you forgot it. And Yetta's like, who are you? To Gracie. But then we learn from Gracie that Fran and Sylvia are being held hostage at the bank. And Yetta's like, and this is how you break bad news to an old woman?
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell gets up. He's like, I gotta go help the situation. And Niles points out, oh, yes, because the SWAT team and FBI need the producer of Jelly's Last Jam. But Maxwell instructs Niles to go get the car or go start the car. So this is how Maxwell learns of Fran and Sylvia's current predicament. Do you have anything you'd like to add to the scene?
I just want to ask, if you were Maxwell, would you go down there?
Right,
exactly. It's sort of what is he going to do?
Yeah, he can't actually do anything.
Exactly.
As pointed out by Niles. I guess he wants to be near in case something happens or to comfort her when she's done with it. But yeah, he logistically can't actually do anything to alleviate the situation.
Thank you. All right. That was the point I wanted to make.
Yes. Well, can you take us back to the bank?
Sure. So people are now not lying on the floor, but they're sitting on the floor still. And Fran is saying to her mother that I can't believe I'm going to die here. My whole life is passing before my eyes. Beautiful baby, most popular girl in high school, maid. And Sylvia's like, I'm thinking how pissed I am. I didn't eat that second Blintz this morning. You're not thinking about daddy? Yeah. Who do you think ate it? And the robber at that point says to them, I'm sorry, but if you can't please be quiet, I'm going to have to gag you. And the woman, the bank teller behind them is like, oh, please, would you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the point that Fran stands up and starts talking to the robber. Sir, I don't mean to tell you how to do a robbery or anything, but, well, you really should have brought some spray paint for those security cameras. He's like, well, that's why I wore the ski mask. And then he's like, it's not pulled down, is it? She shakes her head. He pulls it down. Turns out it's not a ski mask because we can still see his entire face. He's like, I brought the wrong hat, didn't I? And Fran's like, I'm sorry, I don't even know your name. He's like, I'm Leslie Tilbert. And then he's like, nobody heard that, right? And everyone's like, no, except for Sylvia, who's like, he said Leslie Tilbert.
Yep.
And Fran looks at him and says, your mother drove you to this, didn't she? He's like, actually, yes. I need the money to buy her a condo in Florida so I can get her out of my life. Fran takes off her bracelet and is like, I don't know what this is worth, but I want you to have it. Take it with my blessing.
Yes, because she clearly sympathizes with that sentiment.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us back outside?
Yeah, so we're outside of the bank and there's a whole crowd there. We see Val towards the front. And then we hear, excuse me. And Maxwell and Niles make their way through. And, Maxwell's asking Val, have you learned anything? And she's like, oh, he's single, divorced. Oh, who the hell cares? And then Maxwell comments to Niles, oh, she must be in shock. And Niles is like, oh, no, sir. What you see is what you get. And then, they're trying to ask Val again, has anything happened? And she's like, oh, so far it's quiet. And Maxwell turns to Niles and she's like, oh, God, he's killed her.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us back inside the bank?
I'm just specializing in bank robberies today, apparently.
Yep.
Or I guess one bank robbery. So now our now very nervous bank robber is complaining that he's never going to get out of this and that he should have gone to med school like my brother, but I hate the sight of blood. Oh, I should mention that he's sitting at a desk and Fran's sitting like opposite him at the desk. And so Fran loudly says so everyone else can hear, you hate the sight of blood. Mm-hmm. And she like gestures like thumbs up towards the people, because if the guy hates the sight of blood, he's probably less likely to shoot them. Mm-hmm. Sylvia walks over and says, excuse me, I am a hypoglycemic. Mm-hmm. If I don't eat something soon, it may be fatal. And he says, you're not going to die. And Fran clarifies, she meant you. And he's like, okay, what should I do? And Fran's like, I'd order takeout. Right across the street, there's a Roy Rogers, a Kenny Rogers, and a Tony Roma's. We call it the Chaza strip. And Sylvia's like, no, I'd like something light, like fettuccine Alfredo. And then one of the guys who we don't know, but we'll see a little bit more later in this episode, pops up and is like, deli's easier with a group. And Fran's like, he's right. But do we want dairy or meat? Because I could go either way. And like everyone starts talking about like what type of food they want. Well, our nervous robber stands up and I think he shoots his gun again. Shut up. We'll do deli.
Yeah. Yeah. He's kind of like, shut up, fires it again. Everybody, of course, immediately stops, looks at him. And then after like a second, he says, we'll do deli.
Exactly. Did you count this next part as part of the scene or its own scene?
I had it separately, but we could do either.
I had it together because it's like,
it's 2 seconds. Yeah.
So we cut outside really quickly, and the police ask through the megaphone, what's going on in there? Is everyone all right? And we hear Fran saying, we're okay. And the police are like, that's one of the hostages on the megaphone. And Max is like, that's no megaphone. That's my nanny.
And he's kind of like proud when he says that.
Exactly. It's very strange.
Yes.
Would you like to take us to the kitchen then?
Yes. So we're in the kitchen, and apparently we're in the middle of Cece instructing Gracie, because she says, remember, 3 or 4 ice cubes, a martini is not like a smoothie. And then Gracie's like, oh, well, when are we going to, put the lucky gem socks in? And so Cece's confused. And of course, Gracie's like, well, that's how Niles makes yours.
Right.
And of course, Cece gets a look on her face. But this is when Brighton and Maggie come home from school. Side note, I don't know why Gracie was home and they not at school. But anyway.
Exactly.
Yetta's there, and she kind of says, to them, I don't want to upset your sister. But, you know, and I think she forgets again about what she's going to say, right? And Gracie comes up and tells them, like Brandon and Sylvia are,
Well,
held up in the thing.
so Yetta, it's sort of weird because Yetta turns to Maggie and Brighton, and she says, "I don't want to upset your sister," and gesticulates to Gracie, and then she says, "So don't say anything about Fran and Sylvia being held hostage at the bank."
Oh yeah, that's true. And then they're like, "What?" And then she turns, Yetta turns back to Gracie and starts again. "I don't want to upset your sister."
Exactly.
And they explain, the police are over there, because of course Maggie and Brighton want to know if she's okay, if they're okay. And I think, is it Cece who comes up with like, try one of these smoothies, since they're so nervous. And of course she's holding the martini.
Yep.
So again, at this point, Yetta goes off about how, like, doesn't the prune Danish look like Moish Danyan?
Moishe Diane.
Mm-hmm. And, she goes on to say, this is like, when, was it the toast or something looked like Mother Teresa, we're going to be rich. Mugs, t-shirts. And
a cinnamon roll.
Oh, cinnamon roll. Okay. And then again, she kind of like, what? But that's just a random thing to segue into after the revelation that, and in fact, like, your daughter and granddaughter are being held hostage. What?
Exactly.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No.
Can you take us back to the bank?
Yeah. So now Fran is there. Fran's at the now other side of the desk, and she's on the phone providing the list of demands from the robber. He wants a limousine to the airport, a private jet to Mexico, and that Valentino dress in Bergdorf's window. Thank you. And she hangs up. And he's like looking at her, and she's like, "What? They don't got to know you're straight." And the phone rings, and so the robber answers, and he says to Fran, "It's Maxwell again." To which Fran says, "Tell him I'm not here." And he's just like, "Come on, just say hello." And she's like, "No." And so he says to Maxwell, "She doesn't want to talk to you." "Well, I think she's feeling a little hurt right now, Max." And Fran's like, "Tell him we're just sitting down to eat." And so the robber's like, "Okay, all right, I'll talk to you later, buddy. Bye-bye." And he's like, "Fran, I'm so glad you're here." So he hangs up the phone. He's like, "Fran, I'm so glad you're here. I'm totally screwing up this robbery. I'm no good at anything." Fran's like, "What are you talking about? You're doing a tremendous job. Everybody's terrified of you." And she like gesticulates, and everyone pretends to look scared. Where Sylvia walks over, "Drop that pastrami. You didn't want to order. You were too nervous to eat. Now you deal with it." And she takes the plate of food away from him. Do you want to add anything, or would you like to?
Nope.
All right, take us outside.
Yeah, so we're outside, and one of the police officers is telling another one, go around back, see if there's a clear shot from there. And Maxwell then turns to Niles. "Niles, may I confess something to you?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I'm not a priest, although I'm close to living like one." And again, he's like, "It's something awful I said to her." "Oh, is it any worse than, telling her you regret telling her you love her in the first place?" Rip, bloody, I'm trying to see.
Oh, so Maxwell says that he's going to rip the bloody intercom out of the wall.
Oh, yes, out of the wall. And Niles makes a comment, "Oh, I quit for 2 weeks, but I gained a 35 waistline or something."
But I ballooned up to a 38 waist.
Oh, or 38, yes. So anyway, what we, again, 38 waist, couldn't believe something about a card. I don't know. He's kind of having a snappy back and forth with Maxwell to the extent that he's like, I'm all wound up, sir. Do you know what led into that comment?
Yeah. So Niall said that, have a heart, sir. I quit for 2 weeks, but I ballooned up to a 38 waist. And Max was like, I mean, what if, God forbid, anything should happen to Miss Fine and I
Yeah.
couldn't live with myself knowing that those were the last words she ever heard from me. And that's when Niall's like, well, why don't you send her a card? I'm all wound up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because he's obviously being like snippy about the card he did send.
Exactly.
And then he kind of like tries to be like excusing himself for that comment by saying, I'm all wound up, sir. So, yeah. So, like, obviously, Maxwell is feeling guilty that this is what he said to her, and potentially, Fran's life could be in danger. He doesn't want that to be the last exchange they had.
Exactly.
Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, can you take us back into the bank?
So I think Fran is sitting like on the like counter by where the tellers were, and the robber's standing next to her. And then there's that guy who was like, how about deli? He's holding a plate of desserts and he's explaining this is a tartan, this is the chocolate decadence, and a lovely New York cheesecake. And Fran's like, but what happened to the blueberry crumble? And he's like, that went very fast. And we see Sylvia enjoying probably the last of the blueberry crumble.
Mm-hmm.
And so the robber says, gee, Fran, I'm sad this has to end. She's like, oh, you and me both. Believe it or not, this isn't the worst date I've ever had, which parenthetically, is this the worst date she's ever had? We can talk about that later. And anyway, so we hear through the megaphone, you in there, we got you a limo. And he says to Fran, my ride's here. I gotta go. He helps her down. And Sylvia says to him, you want to take a little something for the road? And he's like, oh, no, thanks, Sylvia. I'm full. And Sylvia's like, I'm talking about the money. Oy, is this a schmendrick? And so Fran then mentions that, because it's Friday, you're going to hit all kinds of traffic. Listen to me and you'll be smart. Take the expressway to the Flatbush Circle exit, go around the circle and hang a right. And Sylvia's like, I thought you make a right halfway around. And Fran's like, no. That's the way you go because you always stop at that Mongolian barbecue place. And Sylvia's like, and that's where you make the right. And Fran's like, no, you're wrong. And Sylvia's like, you'll never find it. We'll go with you. And Fran's like, Ma. And the robber's like, oh no, actually that's a really great idea because I could use some cover. Let's go. And he like grabs the money and he like grabs them. And Fran's like, as she's being dragged out of the bank, she says, and still not the worst date I've ever had.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to add anything?
Nope. We are now then outside the bank. Again, Fran's being used like a human shield. Sylvia's there too. Maxwell, of course, immediately yells out, Miss Fine, are you okay? And she's like, I'm not talking to you. And he's like, please, you have to listen. And she makes a comment, it's sad that, she's actually, that she and the abductor are closer, And then Maxwell takes the megaphone and he announces, I'm not sorry that I said I love you. And then the abductor, the robber, tries to be like, oh, she said she doesn't want to talk. And Fran elbows him and says, oh, enough already. And she runs towards Mr. Sheffield. Mr. Sheffield! And, he's saying how he's so sorry. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry that I cut up your silk tie to make that gown for Gracie's Barbie. And then she realized again what she's saying. And she's like, oh, that must be the trauma talking. And then Val approaches and she's like, that bank robber took your mother. And Fran's like, oh, God, that poor man.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us to the kitchen?
So we're in the kitchen and the TV's on and Fran's like, oh, look, they're interviewing Ma on the news. And so we hear the news broadcaster saying that the pursuit ended abruptly when the robber made a wrong turn and was apprehended in front of the Mongolian barbecue. Sylvia Fine, one of the hostages, was with him. Sylvia, can you describe it for us? And she's like, honestly, and she has the takeout container in her hand and she's like eating it like with her hand. She's like, honestly, it's a little fatty. I think they're under new management.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, ugh, I'll tell you, if I hadn't given him that shortcut to the airport, Mom would be in Mexico by now. I'm just going to have to let that go. And Mr. Sheffield comes in. She says, hi, Mr. Sheffield, wait a minute. I have a Valentine's Day card for you. And she hands him the card. And he says, Miss Fine, thank you. Oh, look, 2 puppy dogs kissing. And then he reads the card. For Valentine's Day, I give you my heart. He opens the card. Worm. Heartworm?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, it's a parasite. Dogs get it all the time. It's a joke. And she laughs. And he just looks kind of pained. And she's like, what? And he's like, well, it's a little impersonal, don't you think? And she's like, well, what are you getting upset about? And he's like, well, we have known each other for over 4 years. I just feel, and so they start walking out the door, like towards the office. And Maxwell turns around and says to Niles, who was also there, don't touch that intercom. And Niles is like, you have my word, sir. Well, Gracie comes down the back stairs and he hears her. So he sticks his hand in like chop meat. And he's like, oh, Miss Grace. And she's like, yeah. He's like, would you push that button for me? She does. And he says, thank you. And he takes the bowl of meat and goes and sits right next to the intercom.
Yep. And you kind of hear Fran and Maxwell arguing through
Correct.
the intercom.
Correct.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And that is the episode.
Exactly. All right. So my first question, is this the worst date Fran has ever been on?
I don't think so.
I don't either.
I would put that one where she was forced to go with that former classmate and then he like threatens to jump out the window as
That's
like
the one I was thinking of too.
the episode that enraged me.
Yeah. Yeah, that was not great. Yeah.
I mean, there's just been a ton of times when it hasn't been like a great situation with her dates. I mean, mafia,
That's
fraudster, like, yeah. She doesn't have the best track record.
Yeah. What about the wealthy old guy, Mr. Simmons? Timothy Simmons, I think his name was. The one who took her to Paris and couldn't be bothered to talk to her.
Yeah.
I still think that's better than this date, just by virtue of the fact that she got to go to Paris, but
yeah. I mean, because again, with this date, she at least got food. She seemed very comfortable.
Oh yeah, way too comfortable.
She was kind of in charge.
Yeah.
So yeah. Was there anything else you kind of wanted to talk about in general before we got into our shticks?
No. How about you?
No. So let's jump into favorite fashion. Did you have any this week?
No. But also we didn't have a lot of options because it's all one day.
Yeah. I will just note the drastic change in the last scene. Her hair
True.
is like a short kind of wig.
Yep.
And it's like a very colorful, is it like a bodysuit-esque thing?
I think it was a crop top, right? It's like purple and green, and I think there's orange. It's very bright. But and also for the record looks way more comfortable than what she was in the rest of the episode.
Could you describe what she was wearing in the rest of the episode?
Oh, I would love to. Do you remember the episode where we met Maxwell's mother and she commented about the petroleum product that Fran was wearing?
Yep.
She's wearing another petroleum product here. Yeah. This time, it's a pantsuit. It's bright red, like fire truck red. It has a zipper. The jacket has a zipper down the front. It looks physically uncomfortable.
Yes. And you especially wouldn't want to wear that in summer because I feel like you would be sweltering.
Yeah. Well, thankfully this is Valentine's Day, so it's February, but still, I think it would be uncomfortable to walk in. I think it would be uncomfortable to sit in.
Yeah.
It's bright, and that is the only thing it has going for it. It looks uncomfortable. It just, like, I was uncomfortable watching her wear it.
Yeah. Yep. Was there any other fashion you wanted to talk about?
No. How about
Okay.
you?
Nope. So notable New Yorkers. Um, Now, like we do get some, but overall, I don't think this is an episode where we have a whole ton, right?
I'd say it's a
Um,
moderate number.
yeah, because again, we have, well, and I wanted to double check with you because, whenever they're talking about this, the guy interested in Yetta, and Fran makes the comment about Martha Ray
Mm-hmm.
and Eva Braun,
Mm-hmm.
real people?
Yes.
Okay.
Martha Ray was an American singer and comic actress who is known as the Big Mouth. Eva Braun was a German photographer who is best known as the companion and then wife of Adolf Hitler.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yep.
those are both from our friends at
Yeah.
Wikipedia.
Okay.
You're like, moving on. Good call.
Moving on.
Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually write it down, but I didn't write up a definition. But Social Security is one of the social welfare programs in the United States that provides some level of somewhat guaranteed income for senior citizens.
Mm-hmm. Is First Bank of Manhattan an actual thing, or did they make that up for this episode?
Oh, so I looked that one up. It's a bank located in Will County, Illinois.
Oh,
That
interesting.
opened, and what's particularly interesting is it opened in 1907 with a total of $40,000 of assets. Now it has assets of over 220 million. That's
Oh,
according
wow.
to our friends at First Bank of Manhattan's webpage. They also have now branched out to additional branches, but they're not in New York. So I thought that was interesting.
We have a reference to Lost in Space.
An American sci-fi television show that was inspired by the 1812 novel The Swiss Family Robinson, and it aired from 1965 to 1968 on CBS. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay, I'm going to back up a second. Did you look up who played the robber?
I did not, but that's a really
Okay, because he didn't seem familiar to me. Like it wasn't an obvious kind of well-known guest, but I just didn't know if you had looked it up or not.
I'm looking him up presently. He was played by Peter Scolari. He is best known for Newhart, which predated the Nanny. He was on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the television show.
Okay.
Approximately contemporaneous to this. He was also in Girls. He guest starred on Law and Order SVU. Yeah, and this is all according to our friends at imdb.com.
Okay. We had a reference to both the SWAT and the FBI.
FBI is the Federal Bureau of Investigations. They investigate crime, like domestic crimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually look up the FBI and SWAT.
Yeah, I mean they're a well-known like
government agency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
SWAT team is specialized. Yeah. Police response. No, I mean, that's where you would see, like, if you're watching a TV show or movie, like, they have, like, all of the protective gear, and they kind of are the ones, like, in a hostage situation or, like, certain situations, they're the ones who kind of show up.
Right.
Now, Jelly's Last Jam.
That was a musical by George C. Wolfe that is based on the career and life of Ferdinand Joseph Lamothe, one of the driving forces behind jazz's introduction to the American public. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
That was one of those things where, like, I didn't know if that was real.
Correct.
That was exactly. Oh no, there actually is a musical called that.
Yeah.
Yep. There's then the talk about Roy Rogers, Kenny Rogers, and Tony Romo's.
All of them real. Roy Rogers is a fast food chain that's located in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeastern United States, which at its peak had over 600 locations. Now, after multiple corporate transactions, there are 41 locations in 7 states. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Kenny Rogers is actually a reference to Kenny Rogers Roasters, a casual dining restaurant opened by Kenny Rogers, the singer and former Kentucky governor, in 1991. That's according to our friends at KennyRogersRoasters.com. And Tony Roma's a casual full-service family restaurant with over 100 locations over the world, known for its steak and barbecue. And that's according to our friends at TonyRomas.com.
So there's Mother Teresa.
So Mother Teresa was Mary Teresa. I'm going to totally mispronounce her last name unless you know how to pronounce it.
Not offhand.
Bojack Hugh. I'm sorry, Mother Teresa, that I mispronounced your name. She was an Albanian Indian Catholic nun who died in 1997, after which she was canonized. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Are the other things mentioned in that scene going to show up in a later shtick or not?
Well, some of them are, I think, still in this shtick.
Okay, go for it.
So the cinnamon roll looking like Mother Teresa, actually a thing. It's called the Nun Bun. It was baked on October 15th, 1996, and it bears a striking resemblance to Mother Teresa. And that's according to the takeout.com. Moshe Dayan was an Israeli politician and military leader. He served as the defense minister during the Six-Day War in 1967. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia. David Susskind was also mentioned in this scene. He was an American television, movie, and play producer who also hosted a television talk show. It's according to our friends at Wikipedia. And that's the end of that scene.
Yeah. There's Fran mentions a Valentino dress in Bergdorf's window.
We've talked about Bergdorf's before, so I didn't grab the bio for it. But Valentino, which I think we might have talked about before, but just in case we didn't, an Italian fashion designer. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Is there anything else you kind of pulled?
Just some food, but not necessarily. So.
Yeah, like the different types of pastries.
Actually, more the fettuccine Alfredo and the martini.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
The only thing I'll say is that fettuccine Alfredo is not known for being light.
Nope, it is not. Okay, so are you ready for your shakab?
We are. We actually have a few things this week. Yay. So first off, lobster, not kosher. You all knew I was going to say that, so I'm starting there. Lobster is not kosher because it is seafood that does not have fins and scales. Also, another way of thinking about it is lobsters are sea bugs, and bugs are things that crawl around and are not kosher by definition. So, all right, I'll get off my little soapbox. Blintzes we've talked about before. It's a Jewish food. I think kind of like a crepe, but it's stuffed usually with like cheese, and it's delicious and amazing. Fran refers to the street with the Kenny Rogers, the Roy Rogers, and the Tony Roma as the Gaza Strip. That's a reference to the Gaza Strip. But also Gaza means pig, someone like a glutton. When they were talking about what food to order, the suggestion was deli. And then Fran asked, but do we want dairy or meat? Because I could go either way. And that's like one of the main distinctions under kashrut, or the Jewish laws involving food and what is kosher or fit for consumption. And that's one of the rules that people who don't keep kosher typically would know, even if they didn't follow. So basically you have food, you have Fleischig and Milchig, so meat and dairy, and you don't mix them. Pastrami is the sandwich that Sylvia demands the robber drop. Pastrami is just like typical like kosher deli food. So the reason it matters, that back to the separation of meat and dairy, most I only know of one kosher restaurant that serves meat and dairy, but they serve them separately. Otherwise, a kosher deli typically is just like, is very meat heavy and like comfort food. And yeah. Oi Gewalt, that's the exclamation we've heard before. Sylvia refers to the robber as a schmendrick. That's a fool or a stupid person. And then right as Fran like gets away from the robber, she says, "Genug already." That basically means enough, stop, quit it. And I think that's everything. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, there's just a tuchus reference.
Oh, thank you. Tuchus, that means butt.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready then for 90s nostalgia?
We are. Cars.
So, yeah, for sure. Did you notice in Maxwell's office, like on his desk, it could have been there previously, but I really noticed it this week, like there's a tape recorder kind of thing on his desk.
I didn't notice that.
In addition to, there's always like the older kind of TV behind him with the VCR. But yeah, for some reason, I just took note of that this week.
Interesting. I did not notice that.
It's like one of those large ones we used to have in school whenever we'd listen like books on tape or whatever. I'm dating myself.
So sorry. I thought you said a tape recorder. Did you mean a tape recorder or do you mean the boombox?
Not a boombox. It's not a full-on boombox. It's like, like a cassette player, but like not a boombox.
Okay. I didn't.
I don't know. Regardless, it really took me back.
Okay.
I feel like
yourself.
Yeah.
To quote Niles, you can do better than you. Actually, you can't do better than you. You're wonderful, but
thank you. The other thing too is like obviously they found out about the whole bank robbery situation from like the news on TV, whereas this day and age it would probably be again social media. If you're in the vicinity, you might get like a text alert on your phone, that kind of stuff.
That's a great point. Yeah. Did you notice the old computer on the desk?
The bank? Yep.
They don't make them like those anymore.
Nope.
Yeah. The this is gonna sound kind of silly, but the paper bag that Fran pulled out from like under her seat to be like, put this over the meter. I don't think it works anymore because a lot of places now have those like really like go pay at that central location and then like put the ticket in your window.
Yeah, or like there's an app that you have to like sign into and like that's how you
I hate
get it. So, yeah.
I hate that personally.
Yeah. Okay, anything else?
I'm out.
Okay, now we can add to the after the thing because they distinctly talk about it in this episode. So we are now up to 9.
Woohoo!
Do you have any future fun for us this week?
Actually, is woohoo the appropriate response to adding to the ATP?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. It could go either way.
Okay, I will point out that we're like 16 episodes into the season, and in 9 of them, she's brought up the thing. So, all right, future fun. I have 2 things that I thought were relevant. First, towards the end of season 5, Brighton is going to go, I think, rollerblading, and he is chasing after some girls that he didn't have a shot with, to paraphrase Maggie, and they knew how to stop and he didn't. So he crashes into something and ends up going to the hospital and gets admitted, for observation and whatever. And they won't let Fran visit him because she's not family.
Oh no.
And, Maxwell has gone to Connecticut and like she has to wait until Maggie gets there. And like she's beside herself that she needs to go see Brighton. She needs to know how he is. She tries to bribe the nurse. She tries all these different things. Finally, she sees a nun in a nun's habit walking by. And so she goes and talks to her and manages to talk the nun out of her habit. And so she puts on the habit to go visit Brighton because she's a sister. She can go, make pastoral visits and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she makes this comment about how, she isn't married and she's celibate, and boy, have I missed my calling. You just made me think of that with Niall's comment about how he's this close to living the life of a priest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. And then two, probably more interestingly, Yetta does find love again. She gets engaged to a man named Sammy, who will be played by Ray Charles. Yetta comments about one of the benefits of being engaged to an older gentleman is that he forgot he bought her an engagement ring, so he bought her a second one. Sammy is only on a handful of episodes, but he facilitates Fran's supposed interview for a weather girl position, which I think we talked about a couple weeks ago. He's related to Fran's eventual wedding photographer, who is played by Whoopi Goldberg. And he actually gets Fran into some trouble by asking her if she could help get his grandson, who, as he describes him, is a great rapper, some work on Broadway. Fran thinks he meant a rapper as in a singer, musician. Sammy actually meant a gift wrapper. Turns out Maxwell was trying to do a rap musical, and shall we say, some hilarity ensues.
Mm-hmm. Of course,
exactly. Of course. So we've got some future fun ahead of us.
Awesome. Okay, well then that takes us to our episode rating. As a reminder, we rate each episode 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the least, 5 being the best. But again, we reserve the right to change our rankings at a later date. This week, Debbie, you get to go first.
I know. I hate when it's my turn. So obviously you can tell from the tone of my voice, I do like this episode. I think it's funny. I think it's amusing. It flows very well. The timing on it is great. The jokes land. I really don't like Fran's outfit, but that's really not a reason to deduct from the rating. Do I love this episode? I want to say no, but also I'm thinking I really enjoyed watching it and I've really enjoyed discussing it with you. I think I'm actually going to give it a 5. I think I've convinced myself that I should give it a 5 because there's no reason not to, which is also a great thing to say. But no, it's a fun episode. It's funny. I like the symmetry of it. I like how it comes full circle, that Maxwell thinks he's so clever and gets Fran this card that's a joke. And then she gets offended. And then she gets him a card and he gets offended. So yeah, I've convinced myself it gets a 5. How about you, Bernadette?
Okay. I think I'm probably going to do what I did last week and give a 4.75 because I'm kind of like there with you in terms of like, it was good, but like not my favorite. Like I really enjoyed last week's episode in terms of all the CC Niles stuff. And then obviously there's different things going on in this episode. So I'm just going to stick with a 4.75.
That's fine. I mean,
okay.
Could I give it a 4.75? I probably could.
Yeah.
But like, I think I like this slightly better than Fifth Wheel. I'm going to leave it at a 5 and maybe revisit it as necessary at the end.
Yeah. Well, last week was the nose.
Yes, I know. I was actually comparing it to 2 weeks ago. Sorry.
Okay.
Because last week I gave it a 5. The week before I gave it 4.75. And so I was trying to figure out, did I like it more or less than the one that I did not give a 5 to recently? So that was my thing. Sorry if that was unclear.
No. That's a good clarification. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. Do you have anything else?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited the nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 92, Samson, He Denied Her.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at findtimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.